Welcome flight simmers. In this tutorial we're going to look at how to integrate Pilot2ATC with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And usually I only make videos when I find that there's confusing information or bad information on other videos that I've looked for, or I've searched for answers and it's taken me a long time to find it. So this is showing you how to integrate Pilot2ATC with Microsoft Flight Simulator, but also how to export flight plans. And so I found a lot of bad information, or not good information out there in terms of how to do that. So that's why I'm making this tutorial. So Pilot2ATC, I was so happy to find out when it was integrated with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, because up until that time I was quite frustrated with Microsoft Flight Simulator and preferred X-Plane 11 for planning and operating flights. Anyhow, stop the rambling and let's get to it. So all the information that I found out there in terms of connecting Pilot2ATC with Microsoft Flight Simulator, the first misinformation out there is the startup order in which program you load first. Everything I found out there said to load to Microsoft Flight Simulator first, and there are about 10 reasons why you do not want to do that. One of the reasons is that Microsoft Flight Simulator is very memory intensive, and it'll suck up all your memory no matter how much you have, so that eventually when you do go to launch Pilot2ATC, it can really take some time in opening if depending on where you are at what stage on the flight simulator. But that's one reason. The other reason is you want to plan your flight first with Pilot2ATC and then export your plan before you even start Microsoft Flight Simulator. And so that's why you want to start Pilot2ATC first. And every tutorial I've seen says to do the reverse, which is not good information. However, you can't just launch Pilot2ATC under a normal click and start. You have to run it as administrator, because a lot of computer systems, whether it's your firewalls or antivirus or whatever, it'll block some of the functions of Pilot2ATC unless you run it as administrator. So that's the first thing. First step, start Pilot2ATC and run it as administrator. Then you can create your flight plan, and I don't really care how you create your flight plan. You can use Pilot2ATC or import it from some of the numerous other flight planning services. But here's a plan of say from flight from Heathrow to Amsterdam, the Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, and this was created using Pilot2ATC. However, when you load Microsoft Flight Simulator and try to recreate this plan, you end up with a major headache because it just doesn't like it, and you'll end up going, it'll put in waypoints all over the map, and I really get frustrated with the MacDo on the A320 trying to program it on Microsoft Flight Simulator. On X-Plane it works fine, but a lot of problems on the Microsoft. So we got a nice plan here. How do you export that to the Microsoft Flight Simulator? And you know, for me, I need the cookies on the bottom shelf in order to understand things. And you know, quite often people will say, well, just export it as a PLN, which is I guess the flight plan that is used for a number of Microsoft and Prepare 3D programs, but where do you export it to, and how do you import it into Flight Simulator 2020? And usually people forget one or two things, which you know you have to scramble because you're missing pieces. So what you need to do is to create a folder on your computer where you want to store the flight plan. So I just created a folder here called Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 Flight Plans, and so you just create a folder. Now Microsoft, the Flight Simulator, has its own folder where it stores plans, and it's buried somewhere on your computer. If you can find it, good luck to you, but the easiest thing is to create your own folder, and then to export your file you just click the export button, and you'll see here you've got Pilot2ATC does have a setup here for exporting 2020, and then you just point that to that folder that you created there, MSF2020 Flight Plans, which is the folder that you created, and you just put export, and then it'll tell you right down here that your plan has exported. So then the next phase is there are a couple of things when you launch Microsoft Flight Simulator that you have to do to ensure that your plan comes in as expected. So the next step after you've loaded Pilot2ATC and created your flight plan and exported it is to launch Microsoft Flight Simulator. And so when you come to the screen here, you want to click on the globe to go to creating your flight. So from this screen here, you need to push the load save button to load the flight plan that you saved. And so you go load, and it will default open to where Microsoft has its flight plans saved. And if you can find where that is, maybe you can put that into the paths. But the easiest thing that I've found so far, I may change it later, is create my own folder, which was the Microsoft flight plans, and there's that flight plan we created from Heathrow to Amsterdam. So you just click on that and open that, and there you go. That's the perfect flight plan that was created in Pilot2ATC with all the correct waypoints and everything. And so all you have to do, one of the things frustrating is you want to adjust the time down here, because sometimes depending on what time zone you're in, it may not be the correct lighting conditions of where you want to fly. And you can set your time and the weather conditions, etc. However, there's one other thing, mistake that I made initially is, quite often I like to go to the airport here and zoom to details to choose the gate that I want to depart from. And say I wanted to leave from 226, and I set that as departure. Well, big mistake. You can't do that. Once you've loaded a flight plan, this will put its own flight plan in, which is more or less a direct route from Heathrow to Amsterdam, but the flight plan you loaded is gone, completely gone. So big mistake. You can't choose your gate by zooming down on the airport. So what you have to do is go load again, load your plan, and go back to where you had your flight plan saved previously. And once you load that, there's another way you can get to your gate. So you can see currently when you go to fly now, it's going to put you, on the runway 27. So you have to select from here the drop-down menu the gate that you wanted. And I can't remember what gate it was, but have your gate selected ahead of time in terms of what you wanted. We'll just select 241 for now. I don't know if that's what I want or not, but notice it didn't change the flight plan, so that's very critical. So two things to remember then, that from this screen you need to load your flight plan where you have it saved on your computer, and then don't use the drill down here for selecting your gate for departure, but you need to just use the drop down menu. So use that ahead of time. Either use Pilot2ATC or else a map of the airport to choose your departure gate. And then hit fly and we move on to the next stage. Before we jump into the plane, there's just a couple of options that you want to make sure you have set up to work properly with Pilot2ATC. And when you go to the assistance mode here, in terms of piloting, you just really want to turn everything off. You don't want any type of assistance there. Aircraft systems, the same, turn everything off. Failure and damage, don't worry about it. Navigation aids, the only thing I turn on here is a taxi ribbon. This isn't for departure, but for when you arrive at the other end. It's quite often helpful to use the built-in ATC from Microsoft Flight Simulators to get a direction to taxi to the gate. You can sometimes use Pilot2ATC if you want, and sometimes but I found that it has a hard time understanding your instructions on taxi to the gate, so it's just easier to use the built-in system from the flight simulator, and then you've got also a ribbon then to show you where to go. So that's the only thing I turn on there. In terms of user experience here, turn off everything to do with the ATC here, the voices, and etc. I do put on the open this panel at the start because for the ground services, so this is where you need to use sort of a combination of the built-in flight simulator services of ATC with Microsoft Flight Simulator in combination with Pilot2ATC, and I'll show you how to do that. But once you set those assistant things up, then we want to go back to jumping into the plane. Okay, now that you're in the plane, it looks like I set the departure time a little early. It's still a little dark out. However, no problems. This isn't a tutorial on sightseeing anyhow. The one thing I do like about Microsoft Flight Simulator is when you go to the panels up here in the darkness, you can actually see things, whereas in X-Plane 11 you just see a black screen and you need to get out your flashlight. But here you can turn on the battery, and we'll turn on some dome light to give us a bit of lighting. And then if you look at the external view here, you've got your plane here. Now this is where for ground services you do need to use the built-in ATC from with the simulator. And so if you look at your simulator here, you'll see if you click on ground services, you need to tune to Heathrow ground, and then you need to request power supply, because in the flight simulator, even though it shows you have ground, I like to do a little bit of realism. There is actually no ground power available when you first get in, because it hasn't been hooked up yet. So after you request the ground power, then you could turn on the electrical systems. And so once that is connected, you can go back in and click on available power and just fire up some of the pumps that are needed. You can turn on the logo and put the strobe to automatic. And then if you go back to the ground services, you can select here. It takes a long time for the fuel truck to get there, so I like to request that first. And so that tells me the fuel truck is on the way. Then I also like to connect the jetway, and also the baggage service and the catering service. Alright, so all of those services are now coming to start up the plane. But the main thing is we want to look at how do you program the flight management system, or the McDo as it's called in the A320. when we come back to the cockpit, we've got that warning that the door is open. We've got a door open here for the jetway. Just turn that off. Then let's look at the programming of the flight management system. So when you go to init here, you see that it's got that plugged in correctly. You put in your cost index. Then you look at your fuel here, what your fuel block is, and check that it agrees with the fuel that's loaded. Go to performance. The flex here, it's a very complicated formula for calculating that, and I've never bothered to try and figure it out. So I just basically put something in based on what I find as the outside temperature and a few things. It's incorrect, but it works. And I don't even know if it affects anything, but I just put in based on the outside temperature and what I think it should be. Now we've got the basic things there. We've got going to the flight plan here. We'll see now that the flight plan agrees perfectly with what you have loaded in your ATC from the Pilot2ATC. Well, there's the fuel truck has finally arrived, and so you can load your fuel there. I don't know if you can see the fuel truck. There it is there. So you've got the fuel, the baggage is finished loading, the catering services are finished. So basically, I'm not going through everything there is for it, but I just wanted to show you the setup. And now the next phase that you want to do is to connect your plane to Pilot2ATC. And in order to do that, you need to use the connector, which is called FUIPC or something like that. Anyhow, you have instructions when you download or purchase Pilot2ATC of that connector. And so that's the next phase, is to use that connector. And I also use run as administrator, and you'll see a prompt will come up here asking you, are you sure you want to use this an unknown publisher? You just say yes, and then I am using Komodo here for my firewall. That confirms again that I want to use it. So that is Pilot2ATC uses that little connector to connect to Microsoft Flight Simulator. So once you start that, then from Pilot2ATC you're ready to connect. So you just push the connect button here, and you'll see a green power button come on over here, and check over here that the simulator is connected, that everything is loaded, and then you're all set to go. I always like to file my flight plan once I connect it. You can't file the flight plan unless you are connected, but once you're connected you can file it, and sometimes Pilot2ATC will change your departure runway on you, so you have to reprogram things, but I just want to verify that everything is correct, and you can see here that everything is the same as what we have programmed in there. And now you're ready to use Pilot2ATC. And just to confirm, currently it's set on ATIS. I don't know why I'm not getting ATIS. There's something in the configuration with Pilot2ATC. You should get ATIS when you're connected, and in some airports I do, and some airports I don't. I don't know, maybe it's a glitch in the system. Anyhow, we'll switch over to ground here, and you actually use ground when you're, I guess, in the UK and Europe for filing your flight plans. So we filed it here, and now just to confirm that we're connected, we're going to ask to copy the flight plan and to confirm. Air Canada 587 ready to copy.
Air Canada 587 is cleared to Echo Hotel Alpha Mike. Climb via the Det 2F departure, with the Det transition, then as filed. Expect departure runway 27 right. Climb to flight level 120 via the departure. Expect higher clearances 7 minutes after departure. Squawk 3330.
Air Canada 587 is cleared to Echo Hotel Alpha Mike. Climb via the Det 2F departure, with the Det transition, then as filed. Climb to flight level 120 via the departure. Expect higher clearances 7 minutes after departure. Squawk 3330.
Air Canada 587 rear back correct. Altimeter 3003, let us know when you're ready for pushback.
Altimeter 3003 Air Canada 587.
Okay, that's the end, basically the end of this tutorial, because we're not going to show you everything there is about connecting. I just wanted to show you how to connect it, or how I connect it, and how to use the flight planning system, and then how to export that, because you'll drive yourself nuts trying to get your flight plan to agree with your Pilot2ATC by programming it through the McDo in the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. But everything is working, the connection is working, and Pilot2ATC is a real lifesaver in terms of air traffic control. It just works great. You can use your own voice for communicating. You can have a co-pilot repeat things for if you choose or not choose. But now things are in sync with the Microsoft Flight Simulator, and where I used to hate the Microsoft Flight Simulator, not hate, but get frustrated, now it works in perfect harmony with Pilot2ATC, and it's really great because the graphics are great. Some of the graphics, particularly early mornings and evenings, and the weather conditions are just amazing. Anyhow, enjoy. Let me know if you have any questions or any issues with connecting Pilot2ATC with Flight Simulator, and enjoy your flying.